All right, looks like we're at the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Samantha Oakley from ALA's Public Programs Office. I'm pleased to introduce today's webinar, Evaluating Program Success in a World Gone Virtual. Next slide, please. Before we start, I'd like to make a few quick announcements. Today's webinar is presented by ALA's Public Programs Office with support from ALA's Cultural Communities Fund. To learn more about the Cultural Communities Fund or make a contribution, visit ala.org/ccf. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with Programming Librarian, a website of ALA's Public Programs Office. We have a lot of program ideas and an online learning library full of free webinars just like this one. Next slide, please. Also, a couple of quick notes about our virtual classroom. Only our presenters have microphone access, but you are welcome to type your questions in the Q&A box. To send a question, move your cursor towards the bottom of the Zoom window and click Q&A. Please also use the Q&A window to communicate any technical issues with ALA staff. Please do not put technical questions in the chat window as they could be easily missed if it's very busy there. We will respond to your technical questions as quickly as possible. Also note that this session is being recorded. So if you would like to review any information, you may do so via the archived version that we will send out within 48 hours of this session. Next slide, please. Now, I am pleased to introduce today's presenter for this afternoon, Janie Hermann. Janie is the Manager of Adult Programming at the Princeton Public Library in Princeton, New Jersey. In her role, she oversees more than 2,000 public programs put together by her amazing team. Her work at the library allows her to interact with a wide variety of local groups and organizations, and she is dedicated to ensuring public programs offered at the library not only meet, but also exceed the expectations of the Princeton community. In 2007, Janie was named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker. She has also served on the New Jersey State Library's Blue Ribbon Task Force on the Future of Libraries and is involved in many capacities with the American Library Association, most notably as the chair of the Programming Librarian Interest Group. As a teacher, librarian, wife, and mother, Janie has learned that minute details can have a big impact and that planning is crucial, but you still need to leave room for some spontaneous actions. And with that, I'm pleased to turn the mic over to Janie. You're muted, Janie.
Oh, that's off to a good start, isn't it? Always good to have a good start to your session with being on mute. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here with you on this beautiful day. Well, at least it's beautiful here in New Jersey. And I see we have people from all over the country. And actually, I was looking through as you were coming in, and I'm going to give a shout out to Kate from Belleville, Ontario. I grew up near there in Kingston, Ontario. My sister's in Coburg, so I'm in that area of the country. I haven't been there for over a year and a half because of the pandemic. I can't get across the border to see my family in Canada, but I also see we have people here from New Jersey. So shout out to my home state and those joining us from New Jersey. And I'm really pleased to see so many people here for this presentation. So just going to set the stage. I'm not here as, the definitive expert. I'm just here as another librarian who does programming and who has what I would say is the privilege of being able to devote my job full time to the programming. And so during these last, this last year now, I've been able to spend a lot of time into figuring out things about doing virtual programs that perhaps other people who, so often programming is done by somebody who has other job duties and programming is just one of them. And so maybe they haven't had the time to devote. I've spent a lot of time in the last year reading about this, learning from other industries. I've done a lot of talk with people in the theater industry, in business industry, to try to figure out some new methods of evaluating here in this virtual world. So I'm here to share my experience, what I've learned, and hopefully this will be useful to you. So it's been a changing landscape over this last year. And I think back to last year at this time, we were still doing in-person programs at our library. It's March 12th that we officially closed the library down. Actually, I remember this week last year, we were debating whether we should still be doing in-person programs. And we were discussing, should we start social distancing things? And then it quickly changed. And once we shut down, we weren't prepared to go virtual with our programs. We were a library known for doing great in-person programs, and we had talked for a lot of time about changing to doing some virtual programs or adding some virtual programs, but we were so busy doing in-person programs, we never got around to it. So we took this as an opportunity to dive in and devote ourselves to being the best at doing virtual programs that we could be. So we closed down March 12th, and by April 15th, we were up and running with an account on Crowdcast, and we were doing things on Google Meet, and we had figured out how to do the virtual programs. So we had solved the how problem pretty quickly. And then it took us another couple months to try to figure out some of the evaluating, because we realized soon that this was going to have to be a little bit different. So this is always the big question when it comes down to evaluating programs. What is it that we should collect? And I'm here to say that there's a variety of things that we need to collect. We need to collect stories as well as the data. We need to collect the information that's going to be useful to those that we report to on the local level, as well as the national level and the state level. And sometimes what is needed by a state library or an organization like IMLS or ALA is very different from what you might want to actually present to your board of trustees or your foundation or your community. And so with all of this in mind, having a very comprehensive and evaluation method to collect the evaluation tools, to collect the evaluation that you need to be doing several different things. And hopefully this seminar will help you with some of them. So one of the things that we realized is that there are things that can be collected before the event or program even happens. And this wasn't something that we had really thought about prior to going virtual. And this is something that I learned from the business community when I started delving into what do those who work doing business seminars and virtual webinars. And one of the things is that there are things that you can collect beforehand that can be mined from the PR, event, and marketing that's going to not maybe tell you about the success of the program, but it's going to help you plan for future programs. It's going to give you guidance for what your community wants, what they're interested in, and hopefully that will lead to better success for the program. And so there was data that we were collecting all along that I sometimes was aware of or knew about, but didn't really think about evaluating it in a methodical method. So one of the things is the metrics like email open rates or click-through and registrations. When you're hosting an event virtually, as well as in person, but they tell you who's interested, and they give you this baseline of engagement and intent. Who is really interested in attending this program? And so if you send out a weekly email, I've now started communicating a lot more with our marketing department. And if I have low registration for an event, I'll ask about, well, what was the click-through rate? And sometimes I have a really high click-through rate, but it doesn't turn into registration. So then you have to look around and look at your landscape. Sometimes there's something else going on in town. Maybe there's another big event going on. One night, an event I was sure was going to get high registration did not get high registration or turnout. And there was a really big board meeting that night about the return to school, hybrid versus in person, which turns out had like 1,000 people signed up to attend virtually. So I think that's where my people were. They were more concerned about their kids' education than coming to my lovely program. So then you have social media, of course. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I've just lost myself. There we go. Social media. It's really crucial. You can look at the impressions of your pre-event content, and that can also be translated into attendance expectations if the event is online. And so you can look who's liking your Twitter posts and who is interacting with you on Facebook or Instagram. And is there a way to evaluate that? Again, just to show what means interest. The more likes means more engagement, signifying higher interest and a wider reach. So basically, you want to see what events people get excited about. You want to see what is happening out there so you can strategize for future programs and events. But let's get down to what we do more traditionally. Observing during the program and event. And usually when you're doing a live event, you count the number of people that come in the door during the event and you record that statistic. And we still want to do that during virtual attendance, obviously. But they have some specific metrics that you can track that vary. So one thing is you can involve speaker engagement and views throughout the event. By that, I mean, so we had an event that started out and the speaker wasn't very good. Something happens sometimes, even though you'd vetted them. And I could quickly see people dropping out of the event. They just leave. You know, if you're there in person, sometimes people will get up and leave an event, but they pretty much will stay there once they've, especially, you know, they've committed to it. But also you can see people joining and if they stay for the entire event, and you can observe your metrics going up and down. For instance, we started this seminar with 169 people. Now we're up to 254. So we can observe that. And if at some point I start to get really boring and people start to leave, we can also observe that. Hopefully you won't be leaving and hopefully you'll stay with me. So one thing is we did, one of the ways that we really also observed this is that we did an event with McCarter Theatre here in town at Christmas time. And it was a read aloud of the Christmas Carol. Normally the theater puts this on as a play and they couldn't. So they wanted to do a read aloud over Zoom and they invited people to come and people signed up to do to read in 5 to 6 minute slots. And it was like a round robin reading. And we didn't realize it took us like over 3 hours to read this. And we had 75 people log on to do this round robin reading. And we started actually, the program was 75. And then at the peak of the program, we had over 90. But at the end of the program, 3.5 hours later, we still had 70 people hanging in there with us. And some of them had been there the whole time. They were so enjoying it. And so that to me is a very engaging program. And that's a great story to tell. But you can really track those things. When were people coming and going? And because it was such a long event, I could see the times that were more popular than others, and I was actually tracking it. So you can see what performs best. You can see what gets the highest number of engagements and views. You can review the content they provided and how it was delivered. So there's a lot more that you can kind of, if you're there as the host behind the scene, you can be really observant about what's going on. You can also do things during programs and events that will show how engaged your audience is by doing things such as live polling or having little Q&A things at the beginning or surveys that help them get unique insights into what your audience is consuming and signaling if they are engaged. So basically, with virtual programs, you want to be able to, one of my big takeaways from this hopefully will be that you want to be able to collect information that's going to help you tell stories, that's going to help you frame what you're doing to the powers that be. You don't want to just collect numbers and you don't want to just collect data. You want to collect stories. And so you want to observe these things, that you want to leverage technology during virtual events that will give you access to this more data in in-person events that will eventually help you tell better stories to people like your funders, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So it's, the other thing is collecting information after the event. So you want to go all stages of the event and collect information. It's often difficult to do the follow-up surveys for in-person events. We will have for in-person events, you know, sometimes we select certain events to have follow-up surveys with little paper forms, or we will, if we've had registration, we will do a follow-up with them. Most of our programs that we do in person, we stopped doing registration for because we found that it didn't really translate into attendance. People would sign up just so they would reserve their spot, but that didn't necessarily mean that they were going to show up. And then people who might have signed up felt they couldn't come because there was registration. So we felt registration in a way wasn't a true indicator of who would attend. And we also felt that sometimes it created a barrier. Now there was exceptions. If there's a class that requires materials or there are technology classes, we tend to do a lot more sign up because there's limited seats. But in general, we have a first come, first serve basis for our programs. which means that we don't have a good way to follow up with people by email unless we collect email addresses at the program. But so when we went to the virtual environment, we found that we could follow up a lot easier, but we don't follow up with every program still, because you don't want people to feel like, oh, there's the library again spamming me. So we try to be very thoughtful about it. And we try to think, well, what programs are we doing that we need the feedback from? You know, right now we're doing a push towards doing more health programming. And so if we've done a health program, we'll follow up and say, what topics would you like in the future? Or if we have done a program with a unique guest or speaker that we haven't done before, we might follow up to see if people liked that topic, and if so, what they might want, or to get feedback. How can we improve the experience? At the very start, we were reaching out to people because we were new to the technology as well as everybody else, trying to find out, was there something about the program in terms of technology that we could do better? How could we make it easier for them to access? Was there instructions that we missed? We were trying to figure this out with them. And so we would send out very short, using Google Forms, very short surveys, a couple of questions, and we would try to find this information out to help guide us to better success. The more specific feedback that you can get, you'll make your next virtual events better. Again, this is not necessarily something that you're going to need to be reporting, but it's going to lead you to virtual program success. Here is another thing that I realized. I was reading an article, again, put out by the industry, an industry leader, not in the library world, but that you should actually have a strategy for following up with no-shows and non-responders. And this to me was really interesting. Do you want to find out what prevented them from attending, is what was the advice. And I was like, oh, so in a library, like our library, we advertise our programs. We have, you know, a variety of ways. And oftentimes we will put out, you know, little flyers or handbills, and a lot of people will pick them up, and we can tell that, oh, that program has a lot of flyers or handbills going out the door. So we're expecting maybe a bigger attendance, and it doesn't work out. So people didn't show up, but we can't know who didn't show up, because the only way that we had an indication that we were expecting a bigger attendance is because we went through a lot of flyers. This is just one example. So we don't know, because people are passing through, they're like, or maybe they're picking up, we have a program guide, maybe a lot of our program guides are going out the door, but we don't know who was planning to attend that didn't attend, because we don't take registration. But even if we did take registration, if you have a large program, you don't know who of the people that registered didn't necessarily show up. If you were expecting, if you register 80 people, you're not going to know which 40 didn't, and only 40 come. You're not going to maybe know which 40 didn't show up. So but now, if you've registered people to come to a Zoom webinar, you know who came and who didn't show up. Or you can just send out a survey that says to all the attendees that said, did you attend this webinar or this program? Yes or no. And if it's yes, they get one set of questions. And if it's no, they get another set of questions. And so we started doing this for a few of them. And what we found was a lot of people would say, no, you know, something else came up. Or the most interesting response was, I wanted to be notified so I could watch the replay. And so it was like people were using us kind of like a DVR. Like they signed up because they knew that would give them easier access, or they just wanted, especially for something like Crowdcast, which does the automatic recording, and then it allows them in automatically afterwards. So, you know, again, there's a variety of reasons why people were not attending, but then people who didn't attend, we'd say, you know, what interested you to sign up in the first place? So it allowed us to get some insight into what was happening. And I think the most interesting thing is, and I think all of us are guilty of this behavior. I mean, we have apparently almost 500 people that signed up for today, but we get about 267 here. Those that didn't sign up know that they're going to get an email with the link to watch this at their own time. Again, that DVR type of behavior going on. You can also gather lots of information from the dashboards or the analytics of each of the sites that you're using. So if you're using, you can use, if you go behind the hood of YouTube and Facebook and Instagram even, because you can do some kind of passive interactive programs through Facebook stories where you have people responding. You go behind the hood of each of those platforms and you're going to get some really interesting information that you can use. And then also don't forget after the program to, especially since we're now in a virtual world, you don't only want to find out about the content, you want to find out about the experience, the virtual experience. And so get feedback from your presenters on their experience presenting for you so that you can make things easier and better for future presenters. So we found out very quickly from some of our presenters, we started setting up like a little email saying, this is what you should know, this is the test. And then we found out from presenters that they wanted to have specific information included about the platform, or we actually looked up online and we have a little PDF now that we send out that gives advice for, when you're appearing on screen, it is best to have your computer at a certain length from you, and, to dress in solid colors for better visuals, kind of those sorts of tips. And at the start of the pandemic, especially, a lot of people were not used to doing these things, and they really wanted to have some advice for how they could be best on screen. So the final step in all of this, and what we're going to spend, the rest of the time working on a bit, is, sit back and ask yourself some questions and reflect. And, did you meet your goal for that program or event? And not that every single program or event needs to have really a lot of goals. I mean, and the goal might be to bring our community together and allow them to interact. And that's a perfectly fine goal. So if we have a program where it is simply come together and talk about books that you've been reading this month. And it's in a Google Meets room. And really, our goal for that program is a little bit of readers advisory, because the librarians are on there talking about our books, and we get community members, but it's just also a way to bring people together. And that's the same with our knitting group. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But all the other times, the goal for your program might be higher. It might be, to make sure that people in the community have the information they need to apply for Medicare, which is something, or, to help people plan their spring gardening. Did you meet that goal? Did you, for that event? The other thing is that, and we have a method of doing this through a form, our statistics form, were there any standout interactions during that program or event? We do this in person as well as virtually. Was there a moment that really stood out, where that you could then turn into a story for the board? And you also want to go and make sure you're seeing, how many times are people following up? What is the feedback? And if you send out a feedback form and you had 30 people there and only 2 people reply, that's a problem. So maybe you need to send a little nudge saying, please follow up. But also, what is the feedback that they're giving? And make sure you take time to really reflect on that. What worked well? What could have gone better? And also ask yourself, would I do this program again? And if you wouldn't, why not? And you really want to think these things through. You really want to pause. You really want to reflect. And I have found I've actually got more time for that now that we've gone virtual, because oftentimes when we were doing programs only in life, I was so busy careening from one to the next. I didn't have as much time to pause and reflect. I see we have some questions here, and I'm going to pause for that. Okay, so we have questions here about click-through. Click-through means how many people clicked into an email or an e-newsletter. Which platform is easiest to gather stats from? Each one is very different. I find YouTube gives me really great analytics now that I've gone into their hood. Facebook it's very confusing how they do it. And says, do you have a timeline for events you post live to Facebook or another social media site? Wow, I got a lot of questions coming in here. I'm going to leave the questions until the end at this point, because I want to make sure that we have time to get through. And if I have time at the end, I promise we'll get back to these. And if not, this might be time for some future articles or other types of interactions to answer these questions. There's so many of them. So anyhow, there's a lot of other considerations to measuring success in the virtual world. So one of the big debates I would say that's going on, and I think maybe we're getting closer to having it solved, is how to count live attendees versus replays. So for us, we have an event, and what we will do is we'll see who's there live and we count that. And then every Friday we upload the programs for that week to our YouTube channel that we want to do for replay. Crowdcast automatically creates replays, other ones do not. And we put every program, whether it's Crowdcast or Zoom or wherever else, where we have permissions. Sometimes we don't have permissions from the performers or the authors to put them on YouTube, and then they're only a live program. But if we're allowed to put them up there, we only count replays for the first month. So we will go and so if we have a program live, and then that goes in, and then there'll be another statistics entry later on for the replays. For state library reporting right now, we only account, and the reason why we separated into a separate entry is they will only allow us to report live attendees, not the replays. So we separate that out, and we figure that kind of, even though we know we're going to get more replays after a month, we can't keep going back and checking every month because it's just gathering. So we've kind of set ourselves that when a program is fresh in that first month, fair game to count the replays for our own consideration, so we can see what's getting replays, so we can track that. But we don't, we track the live attendees different. You might decide something different, and you might want to check with your state library to see how they're doing that. Each state library seems to be doing something different, and it seems to be changing all the time. You also need to determine how you're going to have statistics for what we call on-demand or pre-recorded programs. We do a lot of, and I see a lot of other libraries doing this, they do on-demand story times, either on Facebook or on YouTube, where there's never a live element, they're pre-recorded, or they might do some science lessons, some STEAM things where they put them up on YouTube and you can watch it anytime and go along. Again, some national institutions, I think IMLS is one, as well as some state libraries, they're saying, no, it has to have been a live program at all for us to want you to count it. We still count this because we think it's important to our board and to everybody else, and we think it's important for us. And then how do you record statistics for what is usually known as a passive virtual program, or what we would want to call a self-directed? We call it self-directed, we don't call them passive. So we have done some digital escape rooms, we've done some scavenger hunts. So how do you count attendance for those? So we, for instance, have a digital escape room up right now. It's one that we've created, all original content, that leads people through a really fun exercise. And so again, we have that month-long limit. So at the end of the month, the first month the digital escape room has been up, we count the statistic. It lives on a page that we have for this, and we will still have people playing our digital escape room after that, but we just count it for the first month. Same thing with things like a scavenger hunt. So it's a really a big question that we have to ask. How long do you track things like views, plays, and interactions? And you might decide on something longer or shorter. You might say a week, you might say 2 months, and that would be up to each individual library and how much you want to do. But you really need to take these things into consideration, because virtual stuff can live on. It has it's not just while it was live. So we've had some questions in the chat about the platform, and hopefully this will help answer some of those questions as we're going along. So social media sites actually provide a lot of analytics, and you'll need to get to know the lingo, and you're going to have a handout which is linked at the end of this presentation, and in the I think they'll be sent to you as a follow-up email, in which I help you understand some of the lingo. Because if you're not part of your library social media team, or you're not engaged in social media at this kind of level, you might not know what impressions and click-through and engagement actually mean, and they actually all do mean different things. So that's one thing you want to do, is spend some time getting to know the lingo. And then you want to look at the dashboards and get to know them. Now, you might not have access to the dashboards right now. So if you don't, you need to do one of two things. Is you need to make friends with somebody in IT or on your social media team, whoever has access to those dashboards, to those accounts. And you need to ask if you can get access yourself to see those dashboards, a password or a login. And if not, you need to ask them if they can send you screenshots from time to time of what's happening, or if they can download the data for you into a spreadsheet. You need to have access to them. So you need to find somebody in your organization who is going to give you this path. Luckily, in our case, we have a fairly smallish library, and Our IT department is very involved in programming. They come to our meetings. They're very engaged with us. And I'm also part of the social media team. So I've been able to get back into all these dashboards and look at them. I spent probably a fair amount of the month of May, once we had figured out the how to get going, taking tutorials online, and you'd be amazed. There is some really great online tutorials if you need to teach yourself. There's the YouTube Creator Academy. There is Facebook for Media Academy, and you go through those and they're going to help you understand a lot more about what's happening with your platform and how you're engaging people. When are people logging on? What's the best time of day? I was actually just at a webinar this morning put on by our local merchants association, and who was talking about social media engagement. And the presenter, who is a local social media consultant, said, and this was for businesses, but I think it would apply for libraries as well. A lot of the time it's the end of the business day and you decide to wrap up the day by going on social media and posting a few things. But in actuality, it's shown that, especially for Facebook, most people get up in the morning and check Facebook. So you want to actually get up and start your day on Facebook. Not that you won't maybe want to post some content there for those that come home from work and log on at night, but you need to figure out when your crowd is going to be there. And if you actually get access to the back end of Facebook, it will tell you when the people who like your platform, who are like your page, what time they're most likely to be on there. And that's a big way to drive your engagement. Each platform is going to give you something different. And they all have really great online guides and help centers. You just have to go look for them. One of the things I like about Zoom, which I never realized, is that it will tell you when people were having connection problems. It also tells you like what device people were connecting with in software. Like we found out that we have, a lot more people in our community who have older browsers than we ever would have expected. And that kind of and then they were the ones having the connection problems. And then that we started doing some education around that, especially with our senior resource center and some of our older citizens, and about the importance of keeping your software up to date. As I said, Facebook, it'll tell you when your followers are online. It will also tell you minutes viewed. So if you are live, especially on Facebook, it will tell you how many minutes people stayed there. And it'll also tell you, there's this really unique statistics called the 10-second view. And you need to take those 10-second views out of your statistics, because Facebook will often feed a video into somebody's feed without them actually having intended to be there. And then they'll often be there for 5 seconds and be like, why am I here? And then they'll jet out of there. Those don't really count as an interaction to me. And so you really need to realize that you might think you had 300 people in your program, but if they were 10 seconds viewed, or they were only there for 2 minutes because they were there by accident, I don't really think that you can legitimately count that, in my opinion. We use a platform called Crowdcast. It tells me afterwards, it gives me a map. I love it. I'm very visual. It gives me a map of where people were logging in from, and I can see if those people were logging in right from Princeton, or if I had international visitors or people from other states, which often happens more than I would think. It gives you what's called a sign-up conversion rate. So who signed up to who showed up versus who just dropped in, because Crowdcast is social in itself and lets people just drop in on you. YouTube gives you an average view duration and a total watch time, which is really unique. So we found out we were doing our story times online, and our first story times were very long. Oh, not very long. They were 10 to 15 minutes or longer, some of them. But what we found was that most people were only viewing them for 5 to 8 minutes, in that range. And so that told us that, the attention span for an online story time is not great. So we renamed it and we call it Storytime Shorts. And it is literally now an introduction, a song, one story, and then an outro song. And they last about 6 to 8 minutes. Sometimes they're a bit longer, but that's the goal. And our view rates went way up as parents caught on. This is going to be a nice little chunk, something my kid can stay interacted with. And I think if people in their brain know this is only going to be 6 to 8 minutes, they're going to watch it all the way through. And so our total watch time went up because people weren't just watching part of it, they were watching it all the way through. Our attention span is not great these days, and so we need to keep that in mind. And I'm just checking the time here to make sure. Okay, great, we're on time. Speaking of attention span. So this is a screenshot from the Facebook for Media. And it's just giving you an example of some of the data that you can get if you are allowed to go in behind the scenes of Facebook. So this was a live video. This is just an example that they give in the academy. And so I don't know how much the numbers are, but they're pretty impressive if they were. So this is somebody posting live from Snowbird, Utah. And at the peak, they had 12,736 viewers. Now, I don't think that's though what you can report. Now, according to this, over the lifetime of this video, that it's had over 4 million viewers. But then if you go down, you can see the number of 10-second views. So of that, I mean, literally 70% of that is 10-second views. So where in that, only 60% actually completed the entire video. So that's what I said with Facebook, is I think it's really hard to figure out what the view is, and you would need to go in and decide that. Because even peak live viewers, is that what you want? But some of those peak live viewers could have just been there for a minute or two. It's confusing figuring out. Now, when you're live on Facebook, it does show you, it has a little eyeball in the corner that tells you how many eyeballs are on you. So that's one thing where I'd say you could maybe want to observe that. And you will probably observe when you're on Facebook Live, that changes almost every 5 minutes, like 15 viewers, 20 viewers, 5 viewers. People come in and out, in and out. And that's one of the things that I find Facebook Live to be very difficult. We don't actually use Facebook Live for that reason, because we couldn't, it was driving us bonkers. And also our community is not really a big Facebook community. We're much more of we get actually better interaction on Twitter. That's not usual, and on Instagram. Take it for what it is. Here is what's called YouTube Studio. So if you have a YouTube account, an institutional YouTube account, and you get access to YouTube Studio, as I said, there is a lot in that dashboard. And there's, until we went into lockdown, I mean, we'd had our YouTube account for a while, and things went up, but it wasn't really programming related. So I hadn't really ever asked to get back into that channel and look at it. And when I did, that's when I started realizing, that we could get a whole lot of data. It gives you your top videos for the month. It tells you what peak times that they're viewing, tells you how many hours, how many new subscribers. So it's a whole thing there called analytics, which is highlighted over here in the corner. And you can go over and see the analytics. And there's a whole bunch of things that you can get out of this. This is just the overview. You can get even, more granular by going down into engagement and audience and other things. So this is the type of things that if you're not involved in your social media team, you need to talk to them. And you need to say, hey, this information can be important to me to figure out when I should post, how long I should post, what are people interacting with. Oh, why am I not going forward? There we go. Okay, so we've talked a little bit now about the qualitative data, but I want to talk a little bit about quantitative and making these stats and observations that you've been collecting tell a story. And you want to tell these to your stakeholders. These might not be the things. Well, these are important if you've gotten a grant, because you have to often write grant reports. Or if you're writing a grant, you want to be able to tell a story. But you also want to be able to tell a story to your board members, to your foundation if you have one, to your local council or mayor or whoever runs your town, maybe to your state legislators on legislation day. You want to have at hand at any time. I have a running document of stories I can pull out. And Adam Grant, who you may or may not be familiar with, he's a very popular writer on things about social observations online and other things like that. And quite a long time ago now, and it's just the tweet that I source here. And he had, cited this tweet about this a study that was done that said 63% of people will remember when you tell them a story, but 5% will only remember a statistic. And I think that whether that's absolutely true or not, or the numbers are right, I think the important thing to take away is that people do remember stories. And so a couple of years ago, actually more than a couple now, I've been doing this a long time, many years ago, I made sure that there was a chance in every single board report that goes to the board and goes to our foundation, that there was a spot for our program team to tell some stories, to have some information in there. And not just numbers, not just, we had 40 programs this month attended by, 500 people, to tell a story. And so these are some of the sort of things that have gone into our board report lately. One was like during our January virtual book club, we were discussing James Joyce Ulysses. We had 11 card holders, which they want to know who our card holders are, but I'm sorry, I'm getting conscious of the time and I tend to talk quickly, so I'll slow down. But we also had someone join from Canada, actually from London, Ontario, and they were a James Joyce scholar. And then we also had a high school senior from Thailand join, who was planning to come to Princeton University next year. So it was an outstanding discussion and enriched by these two additional members. This is something that could not have happened if we'd been doing in real life programs only in our library. And so this was a great example of showing how a virtual program can still engage our community while having it be enhanced by the fact that it's virtual. Here was another example that we gave them, because they were saying, well, why are we spending so much time on virtual programs? Are they useful? So we've had drop-in and knit on Wednesdays for 3 years. Average attendance of 8 people, sometimes 6, sometimes 10, but we have enough data that we can say 8 people. It's a really nice little cozy program. Doesn't take anything to really prepare. People come into our, sit by our fireplace on the 2nd floor and they knit, and we have a number of librarians on staff that knit. One of them will join them and for a little bit, but they just basically drop in and knit. But since going virtual, we have been averaging 11 people, sometimes as many as 20. We did a little feedback form, and the participants love chatting while they knit in the comfort of their own home. We do it via Google Meets. And so we have now discussed that when we go back, we'll probably do this as a hybrid program where it'll be alternating weeks online and in person. And we've found that we had people who said, I always wanted to come to drop in and knit, but I wasn't able to get myself to the library at that time of the day, or I don't drive anymore, or this has just been a really great bonus for me because I'm a little bit further away and parking is too expensive in town. Whatever the reason is, we now know that we have a really great group of virtual knitters out there, which we never would have discovered if we hadn't been forced to do it. So we use a variety of methods to evaluate our programs, and this is both in before times, as I call it, as well as now times. We still hold our monthly team meetings. This time we now meet, of course, virtually, but we have always had monthly team meetings where we talk about what worked that month and what did not work. And at the team meeting is our youth services librarians, which includes the teen librarian, children's librarians, the head of youth services, myself, the head of adult services. It includes our community engagement coordinator. It includes our humanities specialist and our reader services librarian. So it's a large team, and we all get together and we talk about, in general, what worked and didn't work in each area of our programmings. And it's a really good discussion for us just to keep touch base with what everybody else is doing and making sure we're all going in the same direction. We have what we call our signature events, or they might be called an annual event, bigger programs, and those will require a separate follow-up meeting. So we have our environmental film festival, our Princeton Environmental Film Festival every year. We have our summer reading soiree. We have our Princeton Children's Book Festival. These are our big pinpoint events that kind of each quarter has one signature event. And after that, we'll go back and we'll evaluate that event in specific so that every year we can be improving it. We do an annual retreat, and this is, you're gonna have this in your package of handouts. We do this pause, play, rewind, and start exercise based upon like having a VCR. I think we were thinking it after that, where we evaluate each ongoing program as well as each ongoing partnership for its effectiveness. And you have complete instructions, and I'm not going to go through that right now because it takes a while, but I'll just say what it basically is we decide, is there a program that's run its course and needs to be paused? And pause can mean pause for a year or pause permanently. Play is this program, and we're just evaluating, I should say, our ongoing, weekly, daily, monthly programs, not individual programs. But is there a program or series it's just going great, nothing needs to be tweaked, it's meeting its marks, and then that goes into the play category. Rewind is this program is going pretty well, but there's things that could be done better, or maybe it needs to have a refresh. Maybe it's been going on a while. It's still what we want to do, but it needs to maybe be a new leadership, new name, new whatever. That's a rewind. And then start is something that we've been wanting to do and haven't got around to yet. And so this is where we bring in new ideas to keep everything fresh. And we, a couple of years ago now, reached programming capacity. We realized that at this point, for the size of our team, the size of our building and our community, we can't be adding a lot of new ongoing series and other events to our calendar without burnout. And we're very conscious of that. And so usually we have to pause things in order to start new things. Or if we're going to start something new, we have to really, really want it. We do a lot. We only have so many people. We only have so many rooms. And so we need to really evaluate what we're offering. Is it still meeting the needs? And this counts even in the virtual environment. We establish goals and objectives to meet every year. And I think that's probably pretty common for every library out there. As we've talked about earlier, we survey our attendees. In person, we would do this in a variety of ways with forms, or sometimes, again, with having focus groups is another good way to do it. And then we have this department-wide statistic form that we fill out for each and every program. So, and it's a detailed form. So why create a detailed form, and what are the benefits? And you need to get your team on board that they're going to be very conscientious with this. We even have an auditing method to make sure we don't miss anything. One of the things is it's a pain in the neck up front to get used to doing this, but once you get used to it, you're going to be able to sort your attendance statistics to meet many needs and requests for a variety of reasons. Again, I'm just doing a time check. You can track the impact of individual, annual, and recurring programs on an ongoing basis. It helps you plan for staffing. It can help you track essential information such as the number of volunteer hours, sources of funding, doing outreach, and it assists with grant and report writing. So I'm going to go through what the front end of our form looks like a little bit, and then what we get out at the back end of it really quickly here. And I tried to create a form of this that would be a little bit better than just the screenshots that you could maybe play around with, but it wasn't really possible. I'll work on it some more. Maybe I'll just make a dummy form in my Google account and send it to you. This resides, it is a Google form. One of the reasons we used a Google form is so that it can be filled out anywhere, whether you're at home, in the office, traveling, on your phone. We've had this form now for 6 or 7 years. I'd have to go back and look. It changes every year. We have an annual meeting where we decide what we want to collect that year and why we want to collect it. So, it just starts out whether you're a member of the adult programming team or the youth services, which includes teen. The name of the program, and actual fact, when you go drop down the name of the program, it says other, which is what we do for anything that are a one-off, but then it also lists all the regularly occurring programs like the writer's room or story time or Ask the Mac Pros, or those things that happen weekly or monthly. And then it's just pretty simple from that. Date. We have program category. We have a lot of program categories, everything, I guess, from author talk to ESL classes to health. So we have these categories because we want to be able to track how many we're doing in each category. And pretty obvious here, attendance, and then target audience. And these are the basic types of things, especially attendance and target audience, that you need for like your state report. And then we have another one for age groups attended. So target audience, you can only select one. Age groups attended, you can select 1, 2, or 3. And that gives us an idea how we're doing it intergenerational programming. And then we have, did the program meet expectations? And our goal is that we're always going to have more than 10% of our programs that meet expectation and less than 5% of our programs that are below expectations at the end of the year. And if we're not doing that, then we don't feel we're benchmarking ourselves. And that's just a benchmark that we've gone over the year. And, we basically want to have 80 to 85% of our programs on meeting expectations, and we have pretty high expectations, I will say. And then we can explain why the program met expectations or did not meet expectations. Or you can just write any comments in this form about the program. And that's a large way that we gather our information for our stories, especially what we're going to report to the board. If it exceeded expectations, that's where we're going to get a story. And then we have who was responsible for organizing the program. And then you can't see it. There's other things down there for who actually staffed the program. At the end of the month, the managers can see who's organizing programs, who's staffing programs. We can see if there's one person maybe working too many evenings because they're staffing too many programs at a certain time. So that's where I said it can help with staffing. We can see if there's maybe somebody on the team who needs to up their game because they're not planning enough programs. So it kind of lets us know what our team members are doing. And we have this list goes on. There's a lot of people in our library who plan programs. We have our community partners here, and this one goes on for longer as well. And then so this has changed this year. Where did the program take place? We never before had a category for virtual live event, virtual pre-recorded or passive event, on-site or off-site. It used to just be, was it on-site or off-site? We wanted to know how much outreach we were doing and how much on-site. Now we have more categories. And then this is a whole new category for this year. What platform are you using? And so these are the current platforms that are in high use at the library. And we also want to see how many times you're using a partner Zoom versus our own Zoom, because we partner with a lot of people. So if we're partnering with the university, their Zoom account has bigger capacity than ours. We'll generally use theirs. Or sometimes people just prefer to use their own Zoom account for whatever reason. So we want to also track that. And then we have some categories that are pretty specialized to our library. We have an endowment from the NEH, so we want to track whenever that comes from there because we need to report that every year. And, as I said, we're making a push on health programs, so we want to track that. PEFF is Princeton Environmental Film Festival. That has a grant behind it. So those are basically our grant things or things that are special efforts. And then we have grant category, and our grant categories are things like early literacy, technology, senior citizens, outreach. And so we used to get requests from the development office. They would be writing a grant and they would want to know, oh, how many times last year did we do an early literacy program? And we would not have an easy way to track that. Now we can just go to our Excel spreadsheet with this all dumps into, and we can say, oh, this year we had X number of programs that were early literacy. You might also want to collect time of the event, day of the week, the hours spent planning. These are all things that we've collected in the past, and we got the information that we wanted from them, and we no longer include them. So you automatically, though, also get these lovely charts, which the board loves to see. It tells you how many programs in just general areas. And here you can see that we had 12% exceeding expectations, 84 meeting expectations, and only 3.5% below expectations, which is really great. This was at the very end of the 2020. So we actually met our benchmark and it exceeded it even. We were going for 10% exceeding expectation. And again, since there's about like 15 or 16 people filling out this form, we never know until the end of the year if we're going to meet our benchmark. And we're always very happy when we do. We could also see that we had 72 programs supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities. That just spits it right out for us. It makes it very easy. It tells us then, like, here's some of our grant categories, and you'll be able to go back and look at these slides. Teen literacy, civic engagement, creative outlet, community collaborations. And then last year, we started, of course, only partway through the year, tracking virtual events versus virtual pre-recorded events versus on-site at PPL. So you can see how that all plays out. And so it'll be interesting to see how the pie chart at the end of 2021 plays out versus the pie chart of 2020. And then, of course, there is, so for that year, we had 101 responses. So we don't do it for every program, just things that need to have a comment, such as this was our first virtual go-between club meeting. A go-between club is for tweens. We weren't sure if there would be any interest, but 10 kids came and we had a terrific discussion. It went better than expected. So that's important to know. Program flowed nicely. with slide presentation, prepared text, and a lively discussion afterwards. Lower attendance, but it was finally a nice day, so people were away from their computers. So we're trying to track that, excellent storyteller, those types of comments that we need to do. And then this is a sample of a more detailed feedback form that we've sent out using Google. I've talked a lot about how we send out feedback forms. So this is part of the Princeton Environmental Film Festival feedback. It's a big program that we do. So we sent this out because it was a really hard program for us to figure out how to get into a virtual environment. And that can be a whole different discussion. We're going with it. We're ready to launch it again. We're doing something entirely different based on this feedback. Based on this feedback, we actually paid to have a platform called Eventive, Eventive. They're a platform specifically for doing things like film screenings and film festivals in specific. We did it last year by having people register for what films they wanted to watch and then sending them the passcode onto Vimeo. It was a lot of work for us. It didn't really work out. People loved the films that we were showing. People were thrilled that we managed a way to do a film festival. And that we had to give them a code to watch it because we had paid the filmmakers, because these were documentaries, small documentaries on the environment. So we would pay the documentary person screening fees that would have a limit on how many people could view it. So it was a lot of work going back and forth. Eventive will handle all of that for us, which is really, really great. And so we showed 20 films over the course of 9 days. We had 7 sessions on Crowdcast where we interviewed the filmmakers. So here's the stats, is that we had, over 1,600 people ask for the links to watch a film, but sometimes we had a form for every film. So sometimes people were registering for different films. So at the end, we had 350 unique email addresses from those requests, and 221 asked to be on a mailing list for future film festivals. And then this were the people who watched. So a fistful of rubbish had 63 people log in and watch. This was really important for us to know because, we had paid the licensing fee to have up to 100 people watch this film. So we got pretty good return. So, you want to know those things. So it'll also help us plan for future film festivals to know how many people are requesting the link versus how many people watching it. So it can help us gauge, because for every 100 people that you want to give that link to in this virtual world for things like a virtual film festival, you're paying a higher fee. So we also found out with our post-screening question and answers that we were doing on Crowdcast, we were getting a lot more from the replays than the actual watching live. So this year we're going to actually do some interviews with the filmmakers, but we're going to pre-record them, and there actually is a way into Eventive to load them in, so they just come at the end of a film. So we found that people didn't care as much about watching the Q&A with the film directors live as they did just to be able to have access to it. And again, you can read these when you watch the, I want to make sure, yeah, you can read these when you get the screen, the slides, but we had people really care about this. They gave us 15 pages of comments and feedback about what they wanted us to do in the future. And we really took these to heart to make the program better. Oh, okay. We're almost at the top of the hour, and I see there's so many questions, so many questions. I don't even know if I can, let me see.
I can read them out to you, Janie.
Okay.
So one question that we have is, how did you determine when your team reached programming capacity?
Good question. Number one was we were looking at, were there weeks, there were a lot of weeks coming up where several people on our team had to be in the building more than 2 nights a week. We don't want anybody being in the building. Our goal is to only have each team member have to cover 1 weeknight evening. And there were some times when we had team people in the building 2 or 3 nights a week. And that's not fair to their personal life, because our programs happen largely in the evening. There was also just times where we realized that we were competing against ourselves. We have several rooms in the building, but was it really worthwhile to have something happening in the community room and something happening in the newsroom that we were just competing against ourselves for the audience, and to what purpose? And then there were just like also our marketing team, how much could we market and how much time? And it was just a general sense of burnout. Yeah. And we recognize that. And, we don't have to be all things to all people. all the time. We have to recognize that we're at capacity and that sometimes that you're working against yourself.
Great. And I realize that we're almost at time. Janie, do you have time to
Oh,
hang out for a couple of extra minutes to answer some additional questions?
yeah, I like that question. Are your programming expectations based on attendance or other criteria? No, our programming expectations, I mean, obviously attendance is important because it's what usually everybody wants attendance, obviously. But no, we have certain programs where we don't want high attendance. We want programs where people can connect, even in person and online. You know, a book discussion group, we don't want more than 12 to 15 people. We have a book discussion group that's gotten so popular, we had to split it in two, because once you get more than that many people, so what we're basing there is the quality of the interactions, because too many people in a book discussion group, other people feel too shy to speak up. We also just look at what we know is an important topic. And so if we feel a topic is important, we won't care if it's a smaller attendance, if we feel this is something that needs to get out to the community. Yeah, so now, of course, if it's an ongoing program that you do every week and over time attendance is dwindling and dwindling, well, then maybe it needs to be paused or have a replay because there's a problem there, or maybe it's just run its course. So we try not to always look at attendance, but yeah. And we're not being pressured by anybody in our powers that be above us to only rely on attendance. There's a question here about how we measure early literacy. And to be honest, I am not the person to answer that question. That would be somebody from our youth services department. I mean, we do the 1,000 books before kindergarten. We have our baby playtime. We have a variety of programs for early literacy. We go out into the nursery schools, but I'm not sure how they're actually tracking that up in youth services. That's not really my specialty, and I wouldn't want to answer for them. How do you get honest feedback from presenters who may want to be tactful in order to work for the library in the future? I can't be sure that we are. We have a number of presenters who we first went to for feedback, who we have worked with for a long time, who probably didn't feel threatened that they might not come back. We have a job seeking group that meets every Friday, and they were one of the first ones that we managed to get, that meets every Friday at the library in person. They were the first one that we got up online and running within 2 weeks of us closing down. It was imperative because those job seekers were needing us. And we work with a team of people to put these sessions together, a local group. And so we relied on them to give us some feedback about what we were doing. Same with our writing groups, which is led by some local writers and our poet groups. So we went to some of our original people for a lot of that feedback from the presenters and the people that we work with. But yeah, I can't say that, you know, I think the only thing is that if you're being genuine, you know, I've had phone calls with people if I feel like it isn't, you know, or just say, we honestly want your feedback. This is important to us because we're trying to improve our services. If people feel you're being genuine, I think that they'll be genuine back with you. Let's see. I think, do you require programmers to submit a reflection after a virtual program? I think I hopefully answered that later on in the program. We answer that in person at our meetings. I also have, so there's like 4 people who work for me. So I'm the manager of adult programming, and there's 4 people that report to me, and I have weekly check-ins with them where we talk about each program. And we do write up monthly reports. And so we do spend a lot of time reflecting on that and trying to do that. I actually don't have a project outcome account, but I think I will be getting one after this. We haven't really been involved in that. We've been talking about it, and I think it probably has a lot of good in it. Again, it's almost one of those things where you get so busy in your own little wheelhouse doing what you're doing and careening from thing to thing that sometimes sitting down and expanding yourself is hard to do. And that's why I'm really glad that you all came here today, because you're taking steps to maybe really evaluate. And again, I'm not an expert on this. I'm just telling you what we do, how we've made it through the last year to try to get some insights into what we're doing. And I'm going to say, TikTok viewers, we haven't even played around with TikTok. I'm on TikTok personally. My son's on TikTok because he has 25,000 followers. I'm on TikTok because I have a teenage son who I want to make sure is being safe on there. but we haven't really played with TikTok yet, I have to say. I'm not sure. Yeah. If you're on TikTok, let me know. So I think, that's most of the questions. There's a few others there that I think will take too much detail for us to get into, considering we're at 5 minutes after the hour. And hopefully I've been able to answer at least a few of the questions. I see there's lots in the chat going on as well, but thank you, everybody. Yes, this session will be available to watch later, and someone else is on TikTok, but haven't explored the analytics. I haven't explored the analytics at all of TikTok. Again, my use of TikTok is to be entertained and to make sure my son is staying safe. Yeah. So thank you. I think that about wraps it up. And you'll be getting some handouts and follow-ups. And I want to thank everybody for the interest in this topic. And hopefully if you can come over to Facebook, to the Programming Librarian group there, there's a lot of talk about a lot of these topics over there as well. And of course, programminglibrarian.org has all sorts of articles that can help you with your virtual programming. And so I hope you'll become a part of the Programming Librarian community at ALA.
Great. A huge thank you to you, Janie, for this excellent presentation. I also want to thank my colleagues behind the scenes, Bibi Brown, Sarah Osman, and Hannah Arata for their support of this webinar. And also thank you so much for all of you for attending this session. I've seen some questions go by about follow-up on questions or about how to get a certificate of attendance. Just email publicprograms@ala.org and we can follow up with that. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.